This is the review for the Chapter 5 test. So when you take a look at these first three questions, what you have to say is whether they are positive, negative, no, or non-linear. So go ahead and think about these three and answer these three questions, please. Obviously, there are three questions, but only four choices. So one of your choices will not be used. So in question number one, the dots, as you go from left to right, the dots are going up. Since the dots are going up, this is positive. In question number two, the dots are randomly all over the place. You can't tell if you're going up or if you're going down or what you're doing. So this is no. In question number three, the dots are going up, but then they're coming back down. So this is a U-shaped graph. A U-shaped graph, whether it goes up and then down or down and then up, this is non-linear. The one that we didn't use was negative. Now, what would negative look like? Negative would go down as we go from left to right, all right? Negative would go down. So positive goes up, negative goes down, no is all over the place, non-linear is U-shaped. So your first test question tomorrow will look like that. In the next one, what are the coordinates of the outlier? Now, remember that what the outlier is a point that is far away from all of the other ones. When you go to write the coordinates of the outlier, what you have to remember is your first number is how many you go over, and your second number is how many you go up or down. So go ahead, take a look at this scatter plot and tell me what the coordinates of the outlier are. So the outlier is this point down here, all right? It's far away from all the other ones. So when we go over, we're going over to 8 and we're going up to 2. So this would be 8, 2. Now remember, your outlier is not always necessarily underneath your scatter plot. If you had a point all the way up here in the middle of nowhere, all right, that would also be an outlier. So you have one question on your test tomorrow where you have to type in the coordinates of the outlier. In question number 5, so one of your questions tomorrow, it will have a scatter plot, and you will have to say which trend line is drawn correctly. And then you'll also have to make an estimate. For this one, they want you to make an estimate for where 2.2 would be. So drawing this trend line, remember that when you draw a trend line, it has to follow that same direction as your data. So this one is going up. It has to be a straight line. You want about half your points above, and you want about half your points below the line. So when we go and draw this one, it'd be approximately just like that. All right, it doesn't have to touch every single line. When you do a scatter plot, you do not connect the dots, all right? So it's not like a zigzag type thing, all right? It would be a straight line if I could draw straight with the mouse, right up through the middle of the points, about half above, about half below. So when you go to do an estimate for 2.2, if we find where 2.2 is across the bottom and then go straight up from there, our dot would be right here for 2.2. Well, if we go over, that would also be 2.2. Now, are those going to be the same every time? No, that's just a coincidence for this specific one. They're not always going to be the same numbers, but you go over till you find out wherever that number happens to be, and then go up to your trend line and see what it would be. Again, trend lines go right up through the middle of the data. I think this next question is probably the hardest question on your test tomorrow. First of all, you will be given these first 2 points. I'm going to use this point, and I'm going to use this point. This first one is 30,3, and the second one is 60,6. Those are my 2 points that I'm going to be given. What you're going to have to do is write the equation of the trend line. So you need to find your slope, find your y-intercept, and write the equation. Now, with your slope, the formula for slope is going to be given to you, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Now, you can use this formula if you want to, or to find the slope, we could just take a look at the graph. Remember, slope is always written as a fraction. It would be how many you go up or down as the top number in your fraction, and then how many you go over to the right in the bottom part of your fraction. So you need to find the slope. You need to find your y-intercept. Now, your y-intercept is where the line crosses the y-axis. So where does the line cross this green line? Remember that y-intercepts are always written 0, comma, inside parentheses. For your equation, you're going to have to write the equation. Equations always start off with y equals, and then you need an x. Whatever your slope is goes in front of the x, and then whatever your y-intercept is goes after the x as your plus or minus. So go ahead and try this one on your own, please. I'm going to give you about 1 minute. Go ahead and try this one on your own, please.
Question.
Yes.
So the first point goes to the m, right? And the second point goes to the y to I thing.
No. The m
Right.
is your slope. That's what you're trying to find.
All right, hold on. So which one's the slope? Like from the first
You
point and
have to,
second
you
point.
have to figure it out.
All right.
You have to figure out your slope. So one way to find the slope is to do the formula, all right? If you go to use the formula, remember that all points are written x comma y. Whatever the ones for your first point are, those get ones. Whatever the one for your second point is, those get twos. In our formula, y2 minus y1, we'd be doing 6 minus 3. x2 minus x1, we'd be doing 60 minus 30. When you go to subtract those, 6 minus 3 is 3. 60 minus 30 is 30. This would be your slope. If you chose to reduce that, that'd be fine. Divide by 3, and you would get 1 over 10. Either of those two answers are good for your slope. Now, if you chose to do it by looking at the graph, we want to know how many do go up or down, and then how many do go over to the right. So we're going from this point to this point. Notice that we're going up 1, 2, 3. So we're going up 3, and then it looks like we're going over 3, but we're not going over 3. Notice that across the bottom, each time that we go over to the right, notice that we're really going over 10. So we're going over 10, 20, 30. So we're going up 3 over 30. Notice that that's the same answer that I got by using the formula. So either way that you want to do it, most people will find that using the graph way is easier. Your y-intercept is where the line crosses the y-axis. That crosses right here. That point is 0, 0. Is it always going to be at 0, 0? Absolutely not. All right. It could be anywhere on this y-axis. So when you go to write your equation, whatever your slope is goes in front of the x. So we're going to put 3 over 30 here. Or if you reduced it, you'd be putting 1 over 10 there. And then your y-intercept goes after the x. In this case, it's going to be a plus 0. So this is going to be your equation. Y equals 3 over 30, x plus 0. Please make sure when you go to write your equation, you don't forget your x. So again, I think this is probably the hardest question tomorrow. Take a look at question number 7. Now, in question number 7, you have to graph the scatter plot. So we have words going up along the side, and this is minutes at the bottom. So the minutes are how many we're going over when we go to plot our dots, and the words are how many you're going up. So let's do this one together. We'd be graphing 280. So we'd be going over to 2, up to approximately where 80 would be. I would cross them off as you go. 130 over 1 up to 30. 4, 175 over to 4 up to 175. 2, 125 over to 2 up to 125. 3 and 140 over to 3 up to 140. 4 and 150 over to 4 up to 150. 2.5 and 100. 3 and 100. 3.5 and 225. And 1.5 and 50. So I graphed all my points. Remember, when you do this, because you're going to have to draw one of these, plot the points and draw it in Schoology tomorrow. Remember, you do not connect the dots. If you connect the dots, I will mark it wrong. All right. You never connect the dots when you graph a scatter plot. So now that I graphed the scatter plot, step number 2 here says determine the correlation. So I want to know, is this positive, negative, no, or nonlinear? Well, our dots are going up as we go from left to right, just like we read a sentence. So this would be positive correlation because our dots are going up. So again, do not connect the dots when you draw your scatter plot tomorrow. Take a look at number 8. In question number 8, you have to either answer that it is linear or nonlinear. Now, when you go and do this, linear, you have to figure out your change in your y over your change in your x. When you do your change in your y over your change in your x, if all of them are the same or reduced to be the same, it is linear. If they are different, then it is non-linear. So you have to figure out your change in your y over your change in your x. Remember, you need to go from x to x to x to x, y to y to y to y, then do your change in your y over your change in your x. So let me help you out on this first one. Now remember, in this first one, all points are written x comma y. So 1, 5, and 9 are your x's. 4, 12, and 20 are your y's. What you need to figure out is how do you get from x to x? How do I get from 1 to 5? Well, I'm adding by 4. How do I get from 5 to 9? I'm adding by 4. And then how do you get from y to y to y? To get from 4 to 12, I'm adding by 8. To get from 12 to 20, I'm adding by 8. Now you have to do your change in your y over your change in your x. So your change in your y over your change in your x, we would have 8 over 4. Change in y over change in x, you would have 8 over 4. So when you go to do your change in your y over your change in your x, notice that both of these were the same. Since they were the same, our answer would be linear. Now you have to be careful. If we had another one and it happened to be 2 over 1, would it still be linear? Yes, it would, because remember, we could reduce this fraction. We could divide by 4 and divide by 4 and still get 2 over 1. If they're the same or reduced to be the same, they are linear. Go ahead and try number 9, please. How do you get from x to x to x to x, y to y to y to y? Go ahead and do number 9, please. So to get from -2 to 0, you're adding by 2. 0 to 2, you're adding by 2. 2 to 4, you're adding by 2. 4 to 6, you're adding by 2. 8 to 2, you're subtracting by 6. 2 to -4, you're subtracting by 6. -4 to -10, you're subtracting by 6. Or you could say adding by -6. -10 to -16, subtracting by 6. You want to do your change in your y over your change in your x. So we have -6 over 2, -6 over 2, -6 over 2, -6 over 2. All of those are the same. Since they are all the same, this would be linear. Go ahead and try number 10, please. Again, in number 10, you want to go from x to x to x to x. So this time we're going across, and y to y to y to y. So we're going across. So 1 to 3, or sorry, 1 to 4, we're adding by 3. 4 to 9, we're adding by 5. 9 to 16, we're adding by 7. 16 to 25, we're adding by 9. 1 to 2, we're adding by 1. 2 to 3, adding by 1. 3 to 4, adding by 1. 4 to 5, adding by 1. Now remember, it's your change in your y over your change in your x. So we have 1 over 3, 1 over 5, 1 over 7, 1 over 9. Those are not the same. As soon as you get two of them that aren't the same or reduced to be the same, it is non-linear. So you'll have 3 questions on your test tomorrow that look just like this, where you'll have to choose whether they are linear or non-linear. Take a look at the next type of question. In the next type of question, what we need to do, there was a survey question. Are you a boy or are you a girl? And do you want to go to the zoo, park, or aquarium? We need to make a relative frequency table. So we need to figure out our percentages. When you go to figure out your percentages, remember, you have to do the number divided by your total first. Now, where do we get that total from? We get that total from the total in your survey. All right, so we're going to be dividing all these by 50 because there are 50 total people in the survey. After you do the number divided by total, you're going to get a decimal. We could move the decimal point 2 places to the right. All right, we can move the decimal point 2 places to the right, or you could multiply it by 100 to make it a percent, because we need to make these into percentages. So let's take a look at this first one. I'm going to do this first one with you. So we have boys at the zoo. Boys to the zoo is 10. 10 out of 50 people in the survey. So we would do 10 divided by 50. Remember, we always do the top number divided by the bottom number. 10 divided by 50, when you type it into your calculator, you get 0.2. After you get that 0.2, we have to either move it 2 places to the right or multiply it by 100. I like to move it 2 places to the right. So we move it to 2 places to the right, you get 20%. That's going to be the number that you type in as your answer, 20%. Take a look at the next one. Girls to the zoo is 18. So we would have 18 out of 50. 18 divided by 50. Top divided by bottom. 18 divided by 50 on your calculator, you will get 0.36. After you do that, move the decimal point over 2 places, and you get that it is 36%. Now, you could actually sort of cheat a little bit, and for your totals, you could just add the totals going down and add the totals going across. This is 20 plus 36 is 56%. Those should add up all the time. If you didn't want to do it that way and you wanted to do 28 out of 50 and then move the decimal point over 2 places, that's fine to do it that way as well. You'll still get the same answer of 56%. If we kept on doing these, which I'm just going to save us a little time here, if we kept on doing this, this would be 10% because we'd have 5 out of 50. 4 out of 50 is 8%. We could add these going down and get 18% or do 9 out of 50. 6 out of 50 for the aquarium is 12%. 7 out of 50 for the girls' aquarium is 14%. Then we would have 26%. We could add our totals going across to figure out all these and get 42%, 58%. Now, I do want to draw your attention to this box right here. When we have this box, we would have 50 out of 50. When you go to type that into your calculator, 50 divided by 50 equals 1. Move the decimal point over 2 places, you would get 100%. This number in this bottom right-hand corner is always going to be 100%. All right, so be very careful there. Take a look at the last question, number 12. In number 12, we have some questions that you have to answer based on the table. How many more percent of people surveyed used electric compared to oil? Now, you have to be very, very careful. These in the table are not percentages. Notice that they're asking you in this question to find the percentages. All right, these are not percentages. These are actual numbers. If they just said how many people, then we'd be doing 100 people used electric compared to 50 people using oil. So it'd be a 50-person difference. But in this question, they're not asking you about people. They're asking you about percentages. So we need to find the percents first. For electric, it is 100 out of 250 people. Well, top divided by bottom, 100 divided by 250 gives you 40%. Here for oil, you have 50 out of 250. 50 out of 250 would give you 20%. So when it asks you how many more percent of people, we have to use these numbers, not these numbers. So 40% minus 20% gives you 20% difference. If it asks you about the number of people, then we would do 100 minus 50, which is 50. So you have to be careful here. In the last question, which is a reasonable conclusion? When it asks you which is a reasonable conclusion, we're looking for which statement is true. The only way to do this is to go answer by answer and see which one is true. So half of the people surveyed used gas. Well, using gas is 100 out of the 250. Is 100 out of 250 half? Nope, 125 would be. So it's not choice A. We look at choice B. The majority of people used oil. Well, 50 people used oil out of 250. Is 50 out of 250 the majority? Not even close. In choice C, more people live in apartments compared to houses. Well, apartments, there are 140. Houses, there are 110. More people live in apartments compared to houses. Ding, ding, ding. That's your correct answer. So again, you need to be very careful on what specifically they're asking you for. Sometimes you're just going to use a row. Sometimes you're just going to use a column, and you have to be very, very picky as to what you're looking